4, 3, 2, 1. We are live. Coming to you live at Lichtman Live. Say what's up to the people, Dad.
Hey, good to be back in the good old U.S. of A. after a brief sojourn in London to take part in a documentary on American history and politics there. Welcome to our very shrewd, very smart audience. As always, you blink and things change, right, Sam?
Right.
The tariffs are on, the tariffs are off. We're going to invade Greenland. No, we're not. Boo! What is going on?
People say we have an echo. 1 second. All right, hopefully that fixed it. Give me a quick test. 1, 2, Dad.
Test. 1, 2, 1, 2. No echo.
Well, let's hope. Let's see. I'm waiting for the chat to see if it fixed. Better.
Okay. All right.
So. Yep, fixed. Okay. So before we get into today's episode, which we have lots of fun topics to discuss. Fun. I don't know if that's the right word to use.
I don't know if that's the right word.
We've got lots of topics to discuss. Before we get into that, I want to stop for a second and thank today's sponsor, Aura. Here they are.
Let me tell you something that should alarm all of us. I recently Googled my name and email address. What came up? Dozens of data broker sites claiming to sell my personal information, phone number, address history, even the names of my relatives. This is a multi-billion-dollar industry you never signed up for. Data brokers harvest your information without consent, then sell it to marketers, scammers, and yes, even political operatives. And while they're legally obligated to remove it if you ask, they make the process so confusing and tedious that most people just give up. That's why I use Aura. Aura identifies which broker sites are selling your info, automatically requests removal on your behalf, and follows up to make sure your data stays gone. But Aura goes far beyond that. It's real, all-in-one digital protection. You get alerts if your personal data is found on the dark web. Real-time fraud monitoring for your credit and banking accounts. A secure VPN, antivirus, password manager, and more. And if something goes wrong, you're backed by $5 million in identity theft insurance with US-based fraud support available 24/7. And here's the most important part. Aura offers more features than any other service at its price. So while companies like TransUnion lose control of your data, Aura helps you take it back. Try Aura free for 14 days. Aura.com/Alan Lichtman. That's enough time for Aura to start scrubbing your personal info off these broker sites without you lifting a finger. I'm not leaving myself vulnerable, and you shouldn't either.
Thank you to Aura. Now back to today's regular scheduled programming. Trump delivered a combative, rambling speech at the World Economic Forum in Davos, attacking NATO and laying out an aggressive vision for U.S. power.
Yeah, let me start with something seemingly minor, but very indicative either of Trump's utter ignorance or more likely of his slipping mental acuity. At least 3 times, Sam, he mistook Greenland for Iceland. That is, when he was supposedly talking about Greenland, Sam, he actually used the term Iceland.
Oh, my God.
And when Carolyn Levitt, the toady Trump spokesperson,
Toady,
was asked about it, she came up with an explanation that would baffle even George Orwell.
Really?
She said, no, he wasn't mistaken Greenland for Iceland. He wasn't even talking about Iceland. He was talking about Greenland as the land of ice.
No, that can't possibly be what the excuse she used.
Believe it or not.
Oh, my God.
That is the excuse she used. Spin that should not fool a fourth grader.
Seriously.
Yeah, it's absolutely absurd. If you listen to the speech, it's readily available on YouTube and elsewhere. Clearly, he was naming the entity to which he referred to, which was supposed to be Greenland, as Iceland. He wasn't talking about the land of ice.
God.
Just absolutely head-spinning. That just shows how far we've descended into the pit of doublespeak and doublethink. Of course, there were much more important distortions and lies that are very dangerous that Trump issued in this rambling speech full of grievances. He said, quote, after the war, this is from the New York Times, which did a careful fact check of aspects of the speech, quote, after the war, we gave Greenland back to Denmark. How stupid were we to do that? But we did it. We gave it back. You know what's wrong with that, Sam? We never had Greenland. We never controlled Greenland. We never had sovereignty over Greenland. Yes, there was an arrangement during World War II that enabled the United States to militarily station troops in Greenland to protect it from the Nazis. But in no way, in any shape or form, did that agreement turn over the sovereignty or control over Greenland. In fact, in 1951, the United States unsuccessfully tried to buy Greenland, recognizing fully Denmark's sovereignty over the island. In fact, we were so clear about Denmark's sovereignty that we negotiated an agreement with them to provide a legal basis for the U.S. military presence. Another reason, by the way, why we don't need to invade, own, buy Greenland for purposes of defense, because under that agreement, we pretty much can station whatever troops, whatever defenses we want there. And Denmark and Greenland have indicated they're perfectly open to that. On the positive side, and who knows how long this will stick, Trump says he has no plans further for the invasion of Greenland, but he thinks they've worked out some kind of an agreement that's satisfactory to him, although just like his health care plan that he announced during the campaign, he has concepts for the plan, not, yes.
And European leaders said after they came up with that plan that trust has been lost.
Imagine that, especially after he scathed and attacked and disparaged our NATO allies. I'll talk about that in a few minutes. The only thing I can think of that might go beyond what the United States already has under the 1951 treaty is Trump has his eye on the mineral resources of Greenland, and that's what he really cares about. Just like in Venezuela, he didn't care about democracy, he didn't care about human rights, he didn't care about drug trafficking. The only thing he cared about was gaining control over the oil. If you want to understand Trump, Sam, what do?
Follow the money.
Follow the money. It works every time. He also said the United States was paying virtually 100% of NATO before he intervened and stopped that. Well, the United States was paying about 22% of NATO's central budget and about 70% of the entire NATO budget. Nowhere close to paying 100% of NATO, or something that Trump had to stop. Then he went on to say, quote, so what we have gotten out of NATO is nothing except to protect Europe from the Soviet Union and now Russia. In fact, NATO has invoked its military defense provision only once. And you know who the beneficiary of that was, Sam?
United States of America.
The United States of America. after the September 11th attacks, the NATO alliance rallied to support the United States under the Mutual Defense Agreement, Article 5 of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. And
why do you think Trump is so anti-NATO? Is it just to please his America First people, or is there something bigger or more?
I'm baffled by Trump's policies in Europe. There are those who claim he's a Putin asset. I don't go that far, but he seems to disparage democracies and admire dictatorships. His so-called Board of Peace, right? How many of our NATO allies democracies have joined his Board of Peace to this point?
I'm assuming it's zero.
Zero, but who's in it? Dictatorships, right? Turkey, Hungary, Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, and others. These are the kinds of countries that Trump seems to admire and attacks. And in the end, again, you got to follow the money. You got to figure there's always something financially in it for Trump and his allies. The other interesting thing that Trump claimed is, by the way, let me finish my thought on NATO uniting behind September 11th. You know what country, Sam, per capita suffered the biggest losses in Afghanistan? Tens of thousands of Allied troops, not just U.S. troops were there. And one country per capita had the biggest losses.
Norway?
Denmark, you're close.
Yeah, one of those.
Yeah, the country, we're going after about Greenland. Here's something else that's really interesting. It was not picked up by the New York Times because it requires some deep historical knowledge and perspective. Trump says, Europe has to be so grateful because we intervened and saved Europe from the Nazis, right, during World War II. Well, you know who opposed American involvement in World War II?
Tell me.
The America First Republican conservatives. They were adamantly against American involvement in World War II. In fact, they even opposed Lend-Lease, providing supplies to the nations resisting the Nazis. Even Soviet historians conceded that without Lend-Lease, Hitler would have conquered the Soviet Union and killed at least 3 million or maybe more Jews that lived in the Soviet Union.
Yikes.
And so who didn't want any of this? Didn't want us to protect the Jews in Russia or save Europe? The conservative America First Republicans. It was the liberals, the supporters of FDR, who Trump so disparages and so attacked, who were responsible for the United States, first through Lend-Lease and then getting involved in the war, saving and protecting Europe. And we know Trump has even taken on the label America First, which was developed by all these anti-interventionist conservative Republicans, primarily, or a few others involved, but it was mostly an organization of conservative Republicans. And they were against Lend-Lease, they were against the draft. And here's Trump bragging about the U.S. saving Europe. It was the liberals, the people he calls deranged and animals, that were responsible for it. The New York Times also, if this isn't enough, ticked off a whole bunch of other Trump lies. He claimed to have ushered in $18 trillion in investments, double the figure put forth by his own White House, which was $9.6 trillion, and which expert says even itself is a vast exaggeration of investments, nowhere near $18 trillion. Plus, as we know, what's happened with manufacturing jobs in the U.S., Sam?
You're not going to go through his whole list. I mean, they can go to the New York Times website if they want to see the point-by-point fact check, right? I don't think we need
There's so many of them, yeah. I want to mention one more because he has said the cost of prescription drugs declined by, quote, 5, 6, 7, 800%, or even 2,000%. Is that mathematically possible?
We've talked about this before.
Yes, it means you'd be paying. And he didn't listen to us. He's still perpetrating this nonsense. You don't need to be a fact checker. This is why this is so important. You don't need to be a fact checker to know how outrageous it is to claim you're reducing drug prices by 600%, 700%, 2,000%. That means you would be paying the drug makers. The drug makers would be paying you big money to use their drugs. Now, I really want to emphasize that because he keeps repeating it, even though it is any, grade school student could see, how false that is.
You're surprised by that? I mean, they repeat the same falsehoods over and over and over again, even though they've been debunked over and over and over again. That's a common MAGA playbook.
Absolutely. But this one is so outrageous. You don't have to, know. Is it 18 million, trillion, or 9? Well, you got to go to the website. You got to figure it out. This is absurd on its face and in a very elementary way. That's why I keep coming back to it, because it shows he has no shame. He will continue to issue the most blatant, outrageous of lies that don't even require New York Times fact-checking.
Right, I'm about to say, he's been doing this for a decade now. It's nothing new, really.
But it doesn't mean we can't continue to call it out and point it out. And he did this on a huge international stage as well, which magnifies its importance.
Now, we talked a little bit about Trump's possible reasons for not liking NATO. It seems now like NATO, at least in the United States, the far left and the far right seem to not like NATO anymore. Have you noticed that?
No, I don't. When you say the far left, I don't know who you're talking about. When you say the far right, we know who you're talking. The President of the United States. Who represents the far left? Tell me.
I don't know.
I think that's a phony both sides that I don't buy.
I don't think you're right about that. I've seen a lot of...
Tell me who would compare to the President of the United States.
I'm not
This is one of my pet peeves about both sides.
I'm not doing it both sides. I'm just saying that there seems to be rumblings on... I'm going to say both sides. It's not that I'm equating the two. I'm saying they both seem to have a growing rhetoric of anti-NATO stuff.
But on the one hand, it's the President of the United States. On the other hand, it's people you can't even name. You don't even know who they are. Nobody knows who they are. They're inconsequential. They don't matter. If you were telling me, Gavin Newsom, Hakeem Jeffries, Chuck Schumer were saying these things. They're all, the leaders of the Democratic Party are staunch, strong supporters of NATO. The leaders of the Republican Party, including the President of the United States, have attacked, disparaged NATO and our European allies. There's no both sides here.
I'm not talking, but that's my point too. I'm not talking about the Democratic establishment. There are certain talking heads, even some left-wing Congress people who are not as pro-NATO anymore. I mean, that's just a fact. I'm not doing a both sides-ism thing. I'm just trying to ask you why you think there's...
I can't comment on the left because I don't know who you're talking about and I don't know exactly what they've said.
Okay. What do you think about Trump saying in his Davos speech that he said something to the nature of, they've finally proven that the 2020 election was stolen and they're going to start prosecuting people. Did you hear that?
I didn't, but I'm glad you pointed that out because they're looking at every conceivable excuse to try to go after their enemies. Trump even called it the time of retribution. And, of course, his own Department of Justice, headed by the loyal Trump supporter, William Barr, who's caved into Trump on everything else, said that the claim that the election was stolen is absolute BS. His own head of cybersecurity said it was the most fair and free election in recent times. Every investigation in every state, most of them done by Republican secretaries of state and election officials, have established that the election was free and fair. We saw Trump trying to pressure the conservative Republican Secretary of State to find enough votes, something like 11,600, so that he can win the election. And the Secretary of State resisted that, saying, we've counted and recounted. Our results are fair. I'm not going to fabricate them. So this is another big lie that Trump trots out to try to justify his outrageous efforts to persecute and prosecute his political opponents. We have never, in the history of the country, ever seen anything quite like this. And so far, these bogus indictments have fallen apart. Sam, what happened with the Letitia James and James Comey indictments?
Poof,
disappeared because there's nothing there. There's nothing there in his attack on Governor Walz and Mayor Frey of Minneapolis. There's nothing there. Those prosecutions are going nowhere. The only importance is they have shown how Trump has violated what has always been a wall of separation between our justice system, which is supposed to be blind and impartial. There's this big statue of Justice Blind that he has made open justice's eyes wide open so they can only see what Trump wants them to see and only do what Trump wants them to do. It trashes over 200 years of American practice.
I want to clarify myself. You said name somebody. Here's an example. Bernie Sanders has expressed skepticism of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization alliance, saying that he supports it, but its expansion has needlessly provoked Russia. There's an example.
Fair enough. I certainly disagree with that, but you made a good point.
Anything else about this Davos speech before we move on?
Yeah, one other thing that was of great significance. Our staunchest ally, certainly one of them, is Canada, right?
Right.
Our northern neighbor. And he's also kicked sand in the face of the Canadians, basically saying Canada would be nothing if not for the United States. Absolutely outrageous, gratuitous, no reason for it, just Trump being, grandiose and a bully.
Okay, with that, moving on to our next topic of the night. Our dog is scratching at his bed over here. I don't know if you guys can hear that.
Can I make one more point?
Yeah.
Another thing he said was China has no wind farms. China has more wind farms and more wind capacity by far than the United States. In fact, more than any other country in the world. And there's a bigger issue here. Trump wants to go backwards. He wants to go backwards to the smokestack, fossil fuel economy, which no longer works. And he's conceding, in effect, to China, the economy of the future, the advancement of the future. This fundamentally undermines the American economy and America's national security.
Good point. A new internal memo shows ICE officers asserting the power to enter private homes without a judge's warrant, alarming civil rights groups and legal experts.
It should alarm everyone.
Including you and me?
Including you and me.
What about Kiko?
Kiko can probably take care of himself.
Right.
Can you imagine? They can burst into your home, into your automobile, into your office without a warrant, only on their own say-so. In other words, because we're ICE, we basically can trash the Constitution of the United States. The Fourth Amendment protects us from unreasonable searches and seizures, which has been, except in certain exigent circumstances, you cannot break into someone's house or invade their personal space and personal materials without a warrant. That is one of the most important constitutional protections of our rights and our freedoms. And the notion that ICE can just disregard that is fundamentally antithetical to the constitutional system of this country that has served us so well for over 200 years. But as we know, Trump and his allies care nothing about the Constitution. As Trump says, as president, I can do anything I want. I'm not bound by the Constitution. I'm not bound by the law. I'm not bound by judicial decisions. And it's just fine that this squad under my control can trash the Constitution and burst into your home without a warrant. And we know, that they have not been very careful about targeting only undocumented immigrants. There have now been lots and lots of incidents of their arresting, detaining, on some occasion, very roughly, very unceremoniously, U.S. citizens as well. And there seems to be absolutely no accountability for anything they do. So this ICE officer shoots and kills Renee Good. It's a homicide. It's not suicide. It's not natural causes. It's not an accident. It's homicide. Now, the only argument the officer could have is it's justifiable homicide in self-defense. But that requires an investigation, right? You can't just assume that, even though that's exactly, with no reliable information, what the head of DHS, Kristi Noem, has said. You need an investigation. And the Justice Department says, no need for an investigation. What we really want to investigate is Renee Good's wife, right?
Oh, my God.
Unbelievable.
How does this not violate the Fourth Amendment? I don't understand.
Oh, it clearly does. They don't care. Like all of Trump's waging war without authorization from Congress violates the Constitution, but he doesn't care.
I see this point not being made at all, and a lot of people who are critical of ICE succumbing to this point. Everybody's like, oh yeah, of course we want to get bad, illegal, undocumented immigrants off the street. But again, that is, if you commit a crime in the United States, normal law enforcement is supposed to pursue said criminal. I don't even understand this logic that, again, so many people are just succumbing to. Well, yeah, we need them to get the bad undocumented people out. If you commit a crime in the United States, you get arrested, you go to court, and you get convicted or not. Am I wrong about this?
You're 100% right. I've cited this data many, many times. 70% of those arrested and detained by ICE have zero criminal convictions. The vast majority of the rest have criminal convictions only for minor infractions like traffic violations. This so-called going after the worst of the worst is an enormous, big lie designed to scare you and frighten you. It is an absolute big lie. They are barely touching serious criminals and instead detaining and arresting ordinary people.
Right. ICE in previous years is part of a process of the U.S. law enforcement and judicial system of dealing with undocumented folks that commit crimes, right? But the idea that they're now on the streets wrangling up criminals doesn't make any logical sense to me, and nobody seems to be pushing back on that. Everybody I see who is critical of ICE goes, well, yeah, of course we want ICE out there to get the bad guys. It's like, since when is that ever been ICE's job? Since when does that follow any of the law enforcement or judicial procedures of the United States?
Yeah.
I don't get it.
Was Renee Good a serious criminal?
No, it's not about Renee. I think you're missing my point here.
No, I'm not missing your point. I agree with you 100%. I was saying, I'll repeat it. You didn't seem to hear it, that the vast majority, probably over 90% of those arrested and detained by ICE either have zero criminal convictions or only criminal convictions for minor infractions. You're absolutely right that the ICE sweeps and their brutal tactics have almost nothing to do with removing criminals from the American streets.
Someone in the chat said they're able to do this because of the Lankin-Riley Act, which I'm not super familiar with, but I know Lankin-Riley was unfortunately a young woman killed by an undocumented immigrant.
Right.
I'm not exactly sure what the act did, but I guess maybe that's what it did. It gave ICE...
No, it does not give ICE authority to break into your homes without a warrant. It certainly does give ICE authority to arrest and detain undocumented immigrants. No one's saying they can't do that. But the point is, they're not, in so doing, taking dangerous criminals off the streets like they claim they're doing. They are simply rounding up with all kinds of brutal tactics that impact U.S. citizens, legal residents, ordinary residents of the United States.
Someone says that it strips immigrants of due process. So what I was talking about is that, prior to Trump and this current ICE brigade, ICE was part of the normal proceedings of some undocumented person getting arrested. I guess maybe the Lincoln-Riley Act changed that, and now they can. To
some extent, but yes, they don't have to go through the courts. They don't have to have a court warrant to detain an undocumented immigrant, but they clearly have to have a court warrant to break into your house.
Yeah, I mean,
two utterly different things, and the Lincoln-Riley Act does not supersede the Constitution.
Good point. How you feeling?
Good. A little bit jet lagged.
Right, and you taught a class today too.
I did.
We have 1,200 people watching, but only 300 likes. Don't forget to like the stream. It helps us a lot. And if you're watching, you're not subscribed, please subscribe.
And we need those donations and memberships. Memberships barely cost more than this Diet Coke I'm drinking.
Really?
And they're much better for you.
True. That's a Coke Zero, not a Diet Coke.
Oh, yeah.
Precise.
I never understood the difference between Coke Zero and Diet Coke, but that's all right.
I think it's just a different type of sweetener that they use.
Oh, probably both bad for you.
I think Diet Coke is aspartame, and this is...
I don't know.
Let me see. You learn
Diet
a lot.
Coke is definitely aspartame.
Yeah. No, this has aspartame as well.
It's just labeling.
Yes, it's just labeling. Former special counsel Jack Smith testified before Congress again today on his January 6th investigation. He maintained that he believed he had enough evidence against Trump to convict him. Republicans accused Smith of being politically motivated. They also went on and on about him getting their phone records, a clear distraction from the core of Jack Smith's case.
Clear distraction. This was a conspiracy. When there's a conspiracy, you want to see how far the conspiracy extends. And by the way, they did not get their phone conversations. All they got was that they made calls and how long the calls lasted. They didn't get anything about what was said in the calls. So you're right. This is a total red herring, a complete distraction. And you know what? The greatest refutation of the idea that the Jack Smith investigation was political is that the Attorney General, the Democrat, right? Merrick Garland, my old friend, who appointed Merrick Garland, Sam?
Biden?
Biden. Delayed 2 years before appointing Jack Smith when the clock was likely to run out. If they really wanted to get Trump and this was politically motivated, they would have done so right away instead of going after the non-entities, who are violently attacking the Capitol. It could not be more nonsensical. Plus, if you listen to what the Republicans were saying, did they actually attack the evidence that Jack Smith amassed? No.
Some of them were saying that what he is claiming is a crime actually isn't a crime, but that's as far as I saw it really go.
Yeah, and clearly, that's something for the jury to decide. They didn't say he made up evidence, manufactured evidence, didn't have any evidence. I wrote about this right after in my 2021 book, 13 Cracks. And even then, it was absolutely evident that Trump was engaged in a conspiracy to overthrow the election. Right. Not just the January 6th, which was the worst part of it, but also,
at least the most visceral part of it.
Yeah, but also with fake electors,
right,
with pressuring election officials, with pressuring members of the legislatures in the states. It was all part of the same criminal conspiracy. Now, maybe a jury would or would not find him guilty, but there was more than enough evidence, even to someone like myself who had no access to non-public information is more than enough information to bring the case to the jury. And I'm firmly convinced that had either case, either this one or the documents case, been brought to a jury, that Trump would be convicted. The documents case was dead simple. He took classified documents that didn't belong to him. They belonged to the government of the United States, didn't turn them over, even in response to a subpoena, lied about having turned them over, and over 100 were found when they searched Mar-a-Lago. Very simple facts. And the only reason that never came to trial, of course, was the toady judge violated over 100 years of precedent by saying Jack Smith was illegally appointed. Absolutely nonsensical argument, and then sealed the record so Jack Smith couldn't talk about it.
That was Judge Cannon, right?
Judge Cannon, yes.
Do you think we're ever actually going to see the report, or do you think that's just long gone at this point?
I think it's long gone.
Yeah, maybe in like 30 years or something, but no time soon.
But, that was a dead simple case. Trump, what was his defense? I declassified the documents in my mind. Well, A, you can't do that, and B, it doesn't matter. The Espionage Act, under which he was charged, has nothing to do with classification. There wasn't even a classification system when it was passed in 1917. It simply refers to national security information, which clearly covered the documents that Trump kept.
So obviously, do you think that Trump will ever be held accountable for what happened in the 2020 election, or do you think... obviously Jack Smith testifying, it's a good thing. It's good to get that out there, but his case is pretty much long gone, and he was kind of the last bit of hope for any type of...
No, I don't think Trump will ever be held accountable. Look, in 50 plus years as businessman and politician, he's dodged everything. Beginning with his violating the Fair Housing Act, according to the Justice Department, way back in the early 1970s.
That's sad. I mean, if you even listen to Jack Smith with an open mind for 5 minutes, I mean, it's the biggest scandal maybe ever, and somehow it just kind of dissolves into nothing in the public arena. Nobody seems to... Again, I think it's very good that he goes and does it, but it doesn't seem to make any sort of splash in any sort of public discourse. It's strange. I don't get it.
It's very strange. We become numb. There are so many Trump scandals, so many Trump outrages that we become numb to it. But let me, on a positive note, he's not fooling most people. You know what Abraham Lincoln said?
What?
You can fool some of the people all the time. You can fool all the people some of the time, but you can't fool all the people all the time.
But he did fool. He became president again.
I know. It's hard to believe. I know.
I'm sorry, but I totally disagree. He completely pulled a fast one.
The overwhelming majority of the American people, by double-digit margins, disapprove of his... I know. I get it.
He won.
I know. Hard to believe.
He completely and totally pulled a fast one on literally tens of millions of Americans.
This is true.
Tens of millions of Americans voted this man to be our president again after all of this.
Hard to believe.
I still can't.
You saw the picture of us on election night, being flabbergasted. I'm still flabbergasted.
I still can't wrap my mind around it.
I know. And it's not as if you didn't know what he was.
That's what I'm saying.
We all knew. It was all right out there.
Crazy.
I agree.
After what he called a, quote, good meeting with Trump, President Zelensky is urging European nations to step up militarily and financially support Ukraine.
Yeah, I mean, what did Trump
does that
promise?
Mean, though? Good meeting? I don't know.
Who knows? They always say that. They never say that it was a terrible meeting. No matter whether anything came of it or not, they, always put a brave face on it. But what did Trump say about the war in Ukraine during the campaign? Ended on day one, right?
Okay. Yeah.
And he seems to have totally lost interest in Ukraine and supporting Ukraine, which is why Zelensky is pleading with the European nations who Trump so disdains to step up and support Ukraine. But without strong support from the United States, it's going to be very difficult for Ukraine.
No, I think it's fair to be critical of MAGA's response and whole stance on Ukraine. Totally think that's valid. But again, I mean, Zelensky's saying it here. Is it time for the European nations to buck up a little bit more? I mean, it is happening literally on their doorstep. Do they need to start spending more?
I hope they would, but, they've spent already more than the United States. So, yes, I think they should spend as much as possible, and so should the United States. There's so much at stake here. Remember, this is by far the worst conflict in Europe since World War II. Nothing else is even close. And this is not the end point for Putin. If he wins in Ukraine, he's not stopping here.
That's a scary thought. An autopsy found a Cuban immigrant who died in ICE custody in Texas was killed by asphyxia, ruling the death a homicide and triggering federal scrutiny.
Yeah, good luck with that. The administration going to investigate itself. Apparently, these detention facilities have been farmed out to private organizations, and we know the most notorious prisons are often the private prisons because they care about making a buck, not necessarily conforming to basic cleanliness, hygiene, safety, medical care, and everything else. People are dying. I think now something close to 40 people have died in ICE custody. Something the administration doesn't want you to hear about. They're always talking about, it's the ICE agents who are in danger. Well, how many ICE agents have died? 0. And now we're talking about, approaching several dozen people who've died either in custody or on the streets.
With that, we will get into our question portion of the show. We have almost 1,300 people watching, but only 500 likes. Please like the stream. It helps us a lot. Subscribe if you're not subscribed. Turn on the notification bell so you know we're live. Remember, if you want your question in line for this guy, we take donations or memberships to get into the queue. And now, we used to say it costs less than a milkshake. Now we're getting, with inflation, it might cost less than a Coke Zero.
Or at least not much more.
Right. Thank you to G1 for a $50 donation.
Wow, nice.
This is from Harry Chittenden. Thank you for your donation. They said, never thought I agree with Trump on anything, but he made a valid point in that European NATO states weren't meeting quotas on military budgets. It's dangerous to outscore one's national security, and NATO shouldn't be driven by one member. Thoughts?
I agree with that. We just talked about that. We said, it's important that the European nations step up as much as they can, particularly, that have to increase their budgets to substantially up their aid to Ukraine. But let me say on the other side of all this, military budgets are not necessarily good for humanity or the planet. They have very, very heavy carbon footprints, and to the extent you're spending money on the military, that's going to divert funds from other useful sources of spending. So it's a bit of a double-edged sword, but the viewer has a point.
Have you heard the Greenland theory being about his plutocratic donors like Peter Thiel wanting it as a technocrate island state? Is this a real thing?
I have no idea whether it's a real thing.
I've heard some rumblings about it, but not.
I have too. But
nothing like from big, reputable sources.
Yeah, I mean, who knows? I put nothing past them when it comes to that. But the thing I have heard more directly is Trump's after the mineral resources.
Right, follow the money. Well, also
follow the money. Although this Thiel thing,
could be
following the money as well. But I haven't heard enough about it to be expert on it.
Right. This is from Andrew of 8UQ. They said, I enjoyed your class today, Professor Lichtman. Oh, we got one of your students in the chat.
Nice.
I was wondering what your thoughts are of Franklin Roosevelt's second Bill of Rights.
Yeah, I kind of like that. The 4 freedoms from fear, want, freedom of speech, freedom of religion. These are positive freedoms. most of the freedoms within the Bill of Rights are kind of negative freedoms. The government shouldn't be doing to you, shouldn't be censoring your speech or establishing religious tests for office. This is positive, what needs to be done to improve the lives of people in the United States, and presumably the four freedoms would extend to people throughout the world. Very positive, and we're far from achieving it.
Right. This is from Warriors Come Out to Play 79.
That's a new one on me.
What do you? Oh, you mean you've never heard of them before?
No.
Yeah.
But welcome.
Welcome. Trump taunts that, quote, without the U.S., you'd all be speaking German now. Is it true the U.S. could have won World War II alone without partnerships with Europe?
Not a chance.
The funny thing is he said that in Switzerland, where they do speak German.
Well, remember, I already made the point. It was the liberals, it was the FDR liberals who got us involved in World War II, not Trump's forebears as conservative Republicans. No way the United States could have won the war alone. One would have to argue at least 50% the Soviet Union. You know,
Right.
They suffered 27 million casualties, a huge, huge number beyond what the United States suffered. If they had not so stoutly and bravely and extraordinarily resisted Hitler's attempt to conquer the vast Soviet Union and kill the 3 million Jews there, the outcome of the war could have been entirely different. So you've got to, and of course, the very brave British, who resisted the Battle of Britain and never gave in to the Nazis, are extremely important as well. It's not just the United States.
It seems to me like you remove one of the main allies, they're in a world of hurt,
Yes, exactly. And, as I say, I'm always skeptical of this counterfactual history. What would have happened if?
Right.
We never know. But clearly, if you look at the contributions, it's not just the United States by any stretch.
Right. This is from J. Klein 0079. They say, do you think it's even possible to turn the scandal key anymore?
That's a very good
fair
point.
point.
We're so inured to scandal. God knows what it might take at this point to turn the scandal key. Donald Trump has said he can shoot someone on Fifth Avenue and he wouldn't lose any support. And so far, things seem to be bearing that out.
Well, we were talking about Jack Smith and how his report just about the 2020 election should be, that should turn the scandal key, but I don't think it does somehow.
No, that was also not under the current Trump administration.
Fair. And
yeah, I'm not sure what it would take. Maybe an impeachment and conviction, which seems way far-fetched.
Probably. Republicans in Congress are advancing a stock trading ban for members, but it allows them to hold the stocks they currently have, and they just can't buy any more. Do you think focusing on half measure at best like this sucks the oxygen out of real reforms to the issue?
This is the perpetual question. Are you willing to accept what is practical, or do you want to go for what is ideal? And, it's a very difficult call, but given how difficult politics are, I think if they could ban future stock trading, that would be very beneficial. I'm skeptical whether it's going to happen.
Thank you to George Politis.
Oh, an old friend.
Yeah, they say, hello, Professor Lichtman and Sam, and they donated, so thank you to George. This is from James Lagruta, your fellow Giants fan. They say, the Washington National Opera has recently announced that it will withdraw its performances from the Kennedy Center after adding Trump's name. Your thoughts? Don't ask him about the opera.
This is one opera question I can answer.
Oh!
I think they're absolutely doing the right thing. I don't think anyone who has a shred of backbone and morality should be performing at the center that Trump has hijacked, taken over as president, appointing a bunch of toadies on the board, violating an act of Congress by putting his name on it. He may act dead, but he isn't dead, and this is a memorial to an assassinated president who was a great patron of the arts. I've yet to see Trump as a great patron of the arts. So I think it's a very noble and very needed gesture. I support it.
Me too. I have a good friend who's on the board, actually. And actually, I was at their big yearly event this year. And they were grumbling. That was in, I want to say November. And there were grumblings that they were about to leave. And then it just became official this week. So
right. And they're not the only ones.
Shout out to the WNO. This is a $10 donation from Secular Monk, they say. Do we have any idea of what the, quote, framework Trump negotiated consists of? Trump also stated that he didn't think Europe would come to the U.S.'s defense in his speech. All I could think was 9/11. I think what they mean by framework negotiated on Greenland.
Right.
There's reporting that there was something, but we don't exactly know what it is. And there's been reporting that the European leaders are pretty upset after it.
Trump, you never know. Took him 10 years to come up with a so-called health reform plan that was dead on arrival. It was such a ridiculous, unacceptable plan. 10 years since he promised to have a bigger, better health care plan. So who knows what's involved here. We already have the 1951 treaty, which basically gives us anything we want to defend Greenland. We can put as many, apparently, and they're willing to accept this, as many troops, bases, equipment as they want, as we want. So I've got to believe it has something to do with the minerals, or maybe this Thiel thing. I don't know, but that's the only thing I can think of.
Right. This is from Barbandry. They say, "Hi. Is there another amendment other than the 25th that can remove more than just the president? I saw a video about it, but can't remember where or the amendment they cited. It sounded like it would be pretty effective at this point to get rid of 47, VP, and others."
The only way I know of to get rid of officials other than the president is via impeachment, which is not an amendment, but is in the Constitution itself. Of course, there is the disqualification clause of the 14th Amendment, which could be invoked to get rid of those who were part of an insurrection against the United States, but that clause was eviscerated last year by the Supreme Court.
This is from our good friend Patrick Murray. "I am 100% certain that Trump and the Republicans will tamper with the midterms. If Trump refused the results in 2020, he will absolutely obstruct the right to vote while he is in power. What tactics will he use this time, and how can we vote if the government is in the way?" This is a much bigger topic that needs to be covered.
We have talked about it a lot, and he's right. It takes a lot of discussion, and we have given it a lot of attention. The biggest threat is that he declares an insurrection, declares martial law, and deploys the military at the polling places to intimidate people from voting. Particularly, he'll do it in Democratic precincts, just like he's ordered an investigation of fraud or improper actions in 14 states. Guess how many of the 14 are Democratic states, Sam?
14.
14, exactly. He's tried more legal tactics, but like forcing states to demand documentary proof of citizenship or banning mail-in voting. But the courts have blocked that because the president has no role in the administration of elections. It's up to the states, and Congress can pass laws like the Voting Rights Act that impact voting. But the president has no role. He cannot, by executive order, force the states to change their election procedures. So the greater danger is some kind of police or military action on the part of the president that we need to be very wary of.
This is from Cynthia Gutierrez. They said, Some people support abolishing ICE and replacing it with a new agency. If that happens, what safeguards can be put in place to ensure the new agency does not replicate the same abuses just under a different name?
You know, the great James Madison once said, you can put whatever restraints and constrictions on paper that you want to control an autocratic government. But in the end, if there is not virtue, then none of these paper guarantees will mean anything. So yes, you can put all kinds of restrictive clauses, and I support that, into the charter of a new agency. But if you have a rogue leader like Trump, I'm not sure they're going to make that much of a difference. But definitely there should be all kinds of restrictions such that they have to conform to the Fourth Amendment requirements for searches and seizures.
Dr. Lichtman, is Zohran Mamdani the future of American politics?
To an extent, yes. I've talked about this a lot. Instead of attacking Mamdani, the Democrats' leadership should learn from him. He's the future of democratic politics in that he is able to stimulate enthusiasm, support people getting out and volunteering and working for him and inspiring young people. And the Democrats need to learn from Mamdani what the secret is to that.
I think this first term of his will determine whether or not he is the future of American politics.
I think you make a very good point.
I think if he's seen as a success, you could see a big snowball of other similar candidates and him being a pretty central figure. If it turns out to be a big disaster, he could easily poof and disappear.
Poof, Sam. Wow. Whoa. Very smart.
Really?
Very, very smart, yes.
This is from member Dirtier Dog. They say, when political violence has appeared in American history, what signals distinguish moments that escalated from moments that dissipated? And where does the present fall?
Yeah. Probably the greatest example of political violence that didn't dissipate was the political violence of the 1850s, the attacks on abolitionists, particularly the Bloody Kansas, the virtual war between those who were supporting slavery and those who were opposed in the Kansas Territory under the new 1854 Popular Sovereignty Act, which said the people themselves would decide whether the new territory would be slave and free, and that led to a war between the two sides. And I think what distinguished that from more sporadic periods of violence that did dissipate, like some of the labor wars of the early 20th century, was that they hit upon a fundamental issue on which there wasn't really an easy way to compromise, and in which there were tremendous set interests and emotions involved.
Right. Do historians know how Lincoln became so politically wise despite having only one formal year of schooling? Do we know what motivated him to be such a voracious leader, even though his parents were uneducated?
Well, it's always hard to say what motivates someone. Circumstances are unique, but some things do stand out for Lincoln. One, he was self-taught, so he was able to rise up above his own humble beginnings. And he did have a tremendous thirst for understanding and knowledge. Contrast that with some contemporary.
I think you're talking about Donald Trump.
Oh, would I be? And of course, he had tremendous experience as a lawyer, traveling all over the state, involving himself in all kinds of different cases. He was in the state legislature. He did serve a term in Congress where he showed his ability to stand up to the imperialism of President Polk, who engineered the Mexican War, challenging Polk, who ignored him, to show the exact spot in which American sovereignty was violated and war was necessary. So he did have this thirst for knowledge, understanding this search for reading, this experience in all kinds of legal challenges, and some experience in government. But again, you can't judge someone just by all of these surface things. There is something inside the great men and women which is unique and can't be reduced to any formula.
Tina says, this program is part of my self-education. Thank you, Tina. You're a
We're
smart
trying.
guy, Dad.
Thanks.
All right, we'll do one more question for tonight. It's now past 10
Oh, wow.
on the East Coast.
And I'm jet lagging.
And you're jet lagging. This is from my Fortnite partner, Tupac M. They say, should Americans start seeking political asylum?
Look, I don't want to tell individual people what they should be doing. But there are those who think, the threats to them are so dire that they need to leave the United States, and if they don't really need to seek asylum in certain countries where they could settle. But that's a very individual decision. My own decision is stay in my country. I won't be forced out, but to speak out as loudly and clearly as I possibly can in defense of our nation and our democracy.
Good point, Dad. All right, with that, we will wrap up Lichtman Live for the evening. Big snowstorm coming to millions of Americans, so everybody stay safe out there. Grab your shovels, get some groceries, stay warm.
We did that today, didn't we?
Nice
stocked
stuff.
up. Yeah.
Nice stuff. All right, Dad, what are your final words to the people tonight?
Someone asked me about Abraham Lincoln, and I talked about Abraham Lincoln. Think about Abraham Lincoln. Think why he is perhaps the most esteemed of American presidents. And then think and contrast that with the kind of leadership we're experiencing today, even though that leader has compared himself to Lincoln and claimed he is as great or maybe even greater than Lincoln. I think reflection on Lincoln will bring home what real leadership is and how far we are from that today.
Yes, sirree. A couple quick shout-outs to donators who didn't get on air. Joanne Roberts, Philip H., Tina, you just kicked the desk, and John Rogers. Thank you all so much for your donations. We appreciate that. Okay, folks, everybody stay warm, stay safe if you're in the U.S. If you're in Bermuda or the Bahamas, you're probably fine.
Why aren't we in the Bahamas?
That's my question.
Yeah.
All right, folks. Take care. We will see you next week. Good night.